Welcome back to the studio. We are going to make a vase today, and what we're going to do is use an extender on, I believe this is 4 point, it's just about 4.25, and then the extender is about 2.5. So we're going to make a vase with one of our hand building jigs today, and I will show you how to do that. But first things first, let's go ahead and texture this mat. I found a bunch of these fondant texture strips. I have actually not tried these in clay yet, but I think it's going to work out really nicely. So I'm just going to take this and use my little roller doodad. Zero clue what this thing is called. I keep thinking like an ink brayer, but this is not that. Or maybe it is. I don't know. Shoot me a comment if you know what this is called. What the funny thing is I actually bought this once upon a time, so I had to have known what the name was at one point in my life. Whoops. Remember, I'm a clumsy potter. Don't ever forget that. I just gouged a really big fingerprint in that one. It's going to add character. Oh, look at that. I love that. How satisfying was that reveal? Okay, so now I'm going to decide. I was thinking I would border this, but since those are so wide and so lovely, I think I might just add some different, maybe a vine stamping pattern along the top there, which I think is really pretty. I'm just going to try to find maybe this one. This one's really sweet. So what I'm finding, these are just wooden clay stamps from Amazon. That one's kind of sweet too. I like to just bring them all out so I can see which one matches. I've got a whole little bowl of them here. And this border one I've been loving. This one took me a long time to get because it's pretty big. But I'm thinking, ooh, that is, oh boy, I might have to combo. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with this block and I'm going to position it not all the way up to the top, because as I treat the lip of my vase, I don't want to lose a lot of that texture. I think what I'll do is just push with my hands. And I always find, which is ironic because I'm right-handed, that the left side of my stamp is usually impressed deeper. So I'm just going to come in on this right side, hopefully to even that up. There we go. So I'm going to just start this here. I don't mind seeing where the pattern starts and stops, so I'm not too worried about how matched up I am there. What I really would like is for this to look hand stamped. Beautiful. And I do like that. Do you see those little, there we go. Sorry if my camera's going in and out. That little start and stop point, I actually really love that. I'm gonna try to recreate that on this side. And because I'm trying to recreate it, it just probably won't even happen. But okay, so I have a slab that's a little bit longer than what I need and a little bit thicker than what I need. And I do this when I stamp to give myself some leeway. I love this. When you push your stamp in, it will displace the clay. It will spread the clay out a little bit more. So what I'm gonna do is, because I could not decide between the two of these, this one's so pretty, I'm gonna come along just on the bottom. I'm gonna start on this side, and I'm going to just try to make an even border with that. And you can make adjustments. I can see that my left side is still deeper than my right. I actually don't know why that is, because I do feel like it's even pressure, but maybe I'm trying to compensate with my right hand, so I'm not pushing too deep, and I'm just not pushing deep enough. Thank you for bringing my potter brain with me today in my studio. This is so fun. And then if you're anything like me, texture isn't the problem. It's knowing when to stop. So this looks beautiful. I'm really loving the look of this. So I'm just going to wipe off some of my extra cornstarch there. And there is my textured slab. I'm just going to release it from both sides. I'm going to flip this so we can cornstarch the other side, and I'll show you how to assemble our vase with our hand building jigs. Okay, I am back. I'm sorry, I lost my audio, so I'm just going to re-record this. This is our 4.25 inch jig, and I'm going to use our extender. We have two extenders. We have a 3-inch and a 2.5-inch. This is our 2.5-inch extender. And I'm going to show you how to attach the extender to any jig. Before you add the extenders, you'll want to remove both the keys, the key from the jig and the key from the extender, because we're actually going to flip-flop where those key positions are in. So now you're going to flip the larger piece over so the tab is down, and you're going to use both hands to just spread the jig apart, match them up, and you're going to now put the larger jig key through the shorter end so that it's touching both the larger and the shorter one, and then the shorter key will fill in the gap on the bottom. These keys are meant to be loose so that when you have the tension of the clay on there, they will tighten up. So now that we have our extender attached, we are going to go ahead and put a liberal amount of cornstarch on our slab. This is a step that is so important, especially if your slab is on the wetter side. I'd say if your slab is set up really nicely where it could stand on its own, then you know that you have a really good moisture level. Now we're ready to bring our slab up to our jig. I've already pre-measured this slab, so I know that my seam is going to line up nicely. So I am going to take my vinegar slip and I'm going to be very careful not to create a seal or glue my jig to my slab. So when I'm applying my slip to the scored edges, I'm taking care not to allow any moisture to go between the jig and the slab. I like to use vinegar slip. I think it's really sticky. I have a little bit of my clay body in there. So I have already deeply scored both sides. Now I'm going to start hugging the slab in. Because we have the jig in there, we have a ton of structure to press against. And you'll see I'll start to use a dry palm and dry fingers to really start compressing and adhering the seam. So I'm going to close the seam up here, making sure that I'm squeezing the clay against the jig, using that internal structure to create a really nice shape, but also to make sure that my seam is nice and flat and that I'm not having any cracking or any splitting at that seam. I kind of like to baby this part because if there's going to be any splitting or cracking, it's really going to be at your joint. With my jig, I'm able to access all sides, so I'm going to easily flip it over. It's really lightweight, really maneuverable, and this way I can have access to my bottom. It's just easier to have it closer to my eye line at this point. So you can take a lot of extra steps to hide your seam. I actually like to enhance my seam. So after I've got it smoothed out to eliminate the big bump, I will come through with my rubber shaping tool. I really love this step. It compresses the seam, so it gives you a really strong join, but also removing the slip. That way you're not having additional cracking. I really love to accentuate the seam at this point. I like to enhance the handmade nature, and I think it gives it a really great decorative element. All the while, I'm able to flip my cylinder upside down and right side up because I do have that internal structure from the jig. So I'm just going to follow it all the way from the bottom to the top now. And remember, this is our top side because the key is popping up there. That's how you'll know your top. And at this point, you can come and start working on your, if it's a mug, at a drinking rim, or just your rim in general. I always go with finger and sponge and red rubber tool just to make sure that everything's looking nice as I go. So I will do some final touch-ups on the seam. Again, if you do want to hide that or accentuate it, that's all up to you. Those design choices are that's kind of the artist choice, and that makes it fun. Okay, so this is looking really good. I'm just looking all around to make sure that everything is nice and even. My lip is nice and even, and I am going to get ready to remove the jig and add my bottom on. So we have a neutral position. That's the first key position. I'm going to remove the key. And then I'm going to flip it over and take out the bottom key as well. Don't forget there's two keys when you have the extender in. So when you remove the key, you should be able to take two fingers and kind of click that key area together. This will start freeing up the jig. You'll see how when I start clicking it together, you start to see gapping between the jig and the form. So we will rock into the second position, which keeps that squeezed position, that smaller position. This will be a little harder to do the key, but that's what you want. You want to create the tension, so you create the gap that allows you to remove the jig really easily. At the bottom, same thing. If you smushed your clay too much, you can go ahead and use your thumbs to just kind of free it up a little bit. That won't distort your shape. Okay, that's looking really nice. Let's go ahead and flip our piece carefully over, and we are going to remove the jig. You can see how it pops right out. This is a combination of plenty of cornstarch and clay that as is at the optimal moisture level. If your clay is sticking to the jig, just let it set up a little bit. If it's hard to get the jig out, you can roll it on your work surface a little bit. So now we have an overhead shot. Here is our lovely cylinder, which is pretty amazing considering how much I was handling this form. So you'll want to make sure and address all of your seams. Again, you want to go with the grain. So whichever direction your clay is overlapping, that's the way you'll want to smooth the clay here. And I like to add the rim cone the right size. So I'm going to go up to our XL rim cone on for this jig. And this will give me an option to flip over and have a temporary banding wheel. Using two hands, I'm just going to support the cone, support my form, and flip it over. And then I'll make sure that my form is nice and centered on the cone. So this will continue to give me that structure at the bottom. My rim will stay nice and round, and it gives me a banding option where I'm able to spin my form around to address the inner rim. Now we are going to put our bottom on, so I want to make sure I get to this seam at the bottom while I still have open access. It's just way easier to do it at this point than when you have the bottom attached. So I like to take my red rib and then just go and smooth it. And I will do some smoothing work on that seam with my studio brush at the end. So making sure my form is still in a nice cylinder, I'm going to go ahead and add the bottom on next. Taking a serrated rib, I'm going to score deeply and see how my rim cone serves. It's just a tiny banding wheel. It's so convenient. I'm going to make sure that I'm deeply scoring the bottom of this vessel. And then I'm going to take the lid that I have pre-cut out. And this is the same cutter that comes with this jig in the combo pack. You will use the same cutter, and that cutter will serve for a lid on the top or a bottom for the piece. So in this case, we've got our bottom. I've already pre-stamped it, got my maker's mark in there. There's the cutter, fits perfectly. And then I'm going to take this and I'm going to score deeply the edges, and I will make sure that I have a nice dry fit before I add my vinegar slip to this. Now, my bottoms, you could make your bottoms a little bit thinner. I kind of like to keep them thicker because I am making a vase. And I feel like when it's holding water and flowers, I do want it to be substantial. But you can make your bottoms as thin or as thick as you'd like. So that's looking really great. I'm going to dry fit before I add any vinegar to this, just to make sure any adjustments are easier. It's easier to make any adjustments at this point. So now that I'm happy with the fit, I will go ahead and I will add my vinegar to the bottom piece. We really want to avoid putting a ton of moisture into our cylinder. I find it easier just to apply your slip to the piece that you're going to attach. That way, if anything drips down, you can kind of catch it with your hand and clean it off. We really just want to avoid a lot of water going into our main vessel. So here we've got our vinegar slip. We've scored very deeply. I'm going to flip and put my bottom on. And because we did the dry fit, I just have to position it to the point that works, but this should be almost spot on at this point. Now that I've got it where I want it, I will start applying pressure with dry hands, dry, clean hands. And you'll know that you're applying enough pressure when you see the slip starting to come out from the cracks. That's just kind of a surefire way to know that you're giving it enough pressure. Now, this is just a preliminary step. We are going to do a ton more work to this bottom, but while I've got it bottoms up right now, I'm going to take advantage of that. And I'll come through here with my mini shark fin foot tool and the spine of it. I like to use the curved part of it, and I like to compress my joint, and I also like to just remove some of this slip. Remember, any moisture left behind could lead to cracking issues, and we just don't want to do that. You want to make sure that you're cleaning up all of your slip, working really dry and really tidy. My mini shark fin will come in later on and do more footwork, but for right now, I'm going to grab my banding wheel here, and we've got our banding bat on top of my 8.5-inch Shimpo banding wheel. It just sets right on. I take one of my Studio Pro bat inserts, making sure that I've chosen a really dry one and making sure that there's not a lot of clay buildup around the edges. Sorry for the blurry camera work. It will definitely come back into focus here. So you can see I've got my insert all clicked in, and then I'm going to just wet this a little bit, and this is going to give my pot just a little bit of a sticky surface. So while I'm doing my banding work, it'll be stuck on there a little bit more secure for me. So I've got my rim cone still in. By keeping the rim cone still in, you're keeping tension around the rim, and it's keeping your cylinder nice and straight up and down and keeping our rim in the round. So I'm going to go ahead and apply a little bit of pressure to the pot, making sure I'm as centered as I could get on my banding wheel. And I want to release my rim cone just a little bit here so now I can address my rim and my inner seams. At this point, you could add volume if you wanted to. I'm choosing to keep this vase straight up and down. So I'm going to go ahead and just start doing some finishing work here. Most of our construction is done. You can see we've retained our cylinder beautifully, and I'm able to tackle my sponge. And because my banding wheel is really secure and my bat is really secure there, I can gain quite a bit of speed here and I can start doing some detail work on my rim. So as I tap the pot up and down, I can tell if it's a little bit unlevel. You could pull out a studio level at this point. I can usually tell the way that it's the way that it's spinning. So sometimes if it's unlevel, I will tap it up and down just to make sure that the bottom is secure and nice and flat. So there goes our inner seam. Again, I'm making sure that I'm going with the grain of the clay. I like to do a bunch of finishing work as I go. So now let's address the foot of this piece. I like to take my mini shark fin tool and really start laying in a nice foot. You could leave the foot straight the bottom of your piece straight down on your surface like this. But if you just take off some of that extra weight at the bottom, it really will elevate your piece. It will lift it up. And the shadow that the foot creates really kind of makes your piece look lighter on the table. So that's something that I really like to focus on. And knowing what you want to do with your foot at this point is really beneficial. I like to lay in a really steep angle, a really deep angle with my mini shark fin foot tool because I like to flute the bottom of my vessels. And I'll show you an example here in a second of what that looks like. But what you'll want to do is follow the same angle. Now we've got our bat is so secure with our banding bat system, that green piece that I put in there. So it makes a really secure wear board. So as you're applying pressure to the bottom, your wear board is not moving. I've had that issue before when I've been adjusting my foot and then my piece will slide or the wear board will slide and I'll kind of gouge the piece. And it's something that you can fix, but it really is just kind of a fuss. So eventually here, you're going to want to rock your mini shark fin foot tool up at a steeper angle, and that's going to get rid of the slip, which again is going to help with cracking issues. And we're also compressing the join. So the seam where we have attached the vessel to the bottom, we want to compress that seam so that it is visually pleasing. We don't want to see a crack there. We don't want to see a big seam line, but also this is going to continue to compress to make sure that our vessel is watertight and it is functioning in the way that we want. Now, whether this is a vase holding water with flowers or if you're making a mug holding hot liquid or even a tumbler holding cold liquid, we don't want any leaks. So that's what this step serves here. Now I will come back later on and I will continue to fuss with my bottom, but I just wanted to give you an example of how you can just take off a lot of weight from your vessel and how it just really elevates the pot and gives it that shadow line, which creates a lighter looking pot um, on the surface on which it sits. Okay, that's looking really good. Let's take the last 2 minutes here and just do some finish work and do some treatment on our lip. So I have gone ahead and sponged the bottom. I'm going to now take my finishing sponge and start working my way up the pot. Um, I usually nick my pots or bump my pots, so I come back through a few times, especially at leather hard stage, and just do some smoothing on the outside. This just prepares your pot for a really beautiful glazed surface. So now let's address the lip here. I will take my mini shark fin tool, my foot tool, and I'm going to use it around the rim. Because my pot is secure and I've got my banding bat in place, I can go ahead and really start spinning my wheel and start removing some weight off of the top. Now, this is not a drinking vessel, this is going to be a vase, but I still want the rim to look really beautiful and really round. Now you can see I'm kind of sawing my shark fin back and forth so I'm not getting too much clay caught, and then I'm going to come through and really finish with my finger, finish with the sponge, and just making sure that we're keeping a really beautiful lip and a really beautiful cylinder. The rim on any vessel is super important. So I'm going to come back through with my rim cone and just make sure I haven't knocked anything too far out of round. So you can see as my rim cone is sitting in there, we don't have any major gaps. This tells me that my form is still pretty much in the round. I did find one little gap there, so I just pushed down on my rim cone, and I will take some time to push against the rim cone with a wet sponge, and this just brings my cylinder back to a really beautiful round shape at the top. On a vessel like this, I will leave the rim cone in for about an hour maybe, just coming back and freeing it up and then placing it back in, freeing it up and placing back in. I don't leave it in long enough for anything to crack, but I do want the clay to start drying in that really nice round shape. So I don't mind leaving it in there for a while. So here is our vase with that beautiful texture that we laid in just a few minutes ago. Go ahead and just do all of your finishing work. If you want to add volume, add volume. If you'd like to do any other details, now would be the time. I just hope you had as much fun as I did making this vase. It was so nice spending time together, and we'll see you soon.